I found out my parents had given my late grandmother's pearls to my sister when I saw them hanging around her neck in a photo my mother posted with the caption, "Something borrowed, something blessed." My hands went cold before my coffee even touched my lips. The pearls were not supposed to be borrowed. They were not supposed to be blessed by anyone in that room. They were supposed to be mine. My name is Nora Whitaker. I'm 31 and I work as a records manager for a probate office in Charleston, South Carolina. That job taught me how people behave when memory meets property. Grief makes some families tender. Paperwork makes others honest. But when something valuable sits between love and entitlement, people will tell the ugliest lies with the softest voices. My sister Addison was getting married in 6 weeks, and her bridal shower was being held at my parents' house on Queen Street. The same white-columned place where I used to sit on the porch with my grandmother Evelyn shelling peas into a blue enamel bowl. Grandma Evelyn had raised me more than my parents ever admitted. She taught me how to write thank you notes, how to hem a dress, how to keep my voice steady when someone tried to embarrass me. She also taught me not to beg for what had already been promised. The necklace in that photo was not just jewelry. It was a double strand of cream-colored pearls with a small gold clasp shaped like a magnolia blossom. Grandma wore it to church every Easter and to my high school graduation, even though my mother said the ceremony was too long and Addison had a dance recital that afternoon. Grandma sat in the front row alone, clapping so hard her rings clicked together. Afterward, she touched the pearls and said, "One day, Nora, these will remind you that you were seen." At 17, I did not know how badly I would need that sentence. I did not know that in my family being seen was something Addison received automatically, like birthday cakes and new cars and soft forgiveness. I had to earn it with grades, chores, silence, and usefulness. Even then, it was temporary. Even then, it could be revoked. My parents had a language for favoritism that sounded respectable. Addison was sensitive. Addison needed encouragement. Addison was the baby. Addison had a big heart. When she broke something, she was overwhelmed. When she lied, she was scared. When she took something, she admired it. When I objected, I was difficult, jealous, dramatic, keeping score. By the time we were adults, I had learned the family math. Addison's feelings counted as facts. My facts counted as attacks. The bridal shower invitation had come 3 weeks earlier, thick cardstock with pale pink roses and gold lettering. My mother mailed it instead of calling, even though we lived 12 minutes apart. At the bottom in her careful handwriting she wrote, "Please don't make this tense. It's Addison's day." That was my mother's way of asking me to arrive pre-blamed. I almost threw the invitation away. I had not been close to my family since Grandma Evelyn's funeral 2 years earlier, when my father told me not to cry too loudly because Addison was already upset. I remember standing beside the grave in a black dress I had bought on clearance, watching Addison sob into my mother's shoulder while wearing Grandma's sapphire brooch pinned to her coat. Nobody asked where she got it. After Grandma died, my parents said her personal things had been put away until everyone was emotionally ready. That meant, until Addison wanted something. Her teacups appeared in Addison's apartment. Her antique mirror became part of Addison's vanity corner. Her recipe box showed up in a staged engagement shoot tied with ribbon like a prop. Every time I noticed my mother acted wounded. "Do you really want to fight over objects?" she asked once, standing in her kitchen with Grandma's silver sugar spoon in her hand. I said, "No. I want you to stop pretending they're only objects when Addison wants them." My father lowered his newspaper and gave me the look he used when he wanted me to feel 16 again. "Your grandmother wanted peace in this family, Nora." That was the sentence they used whenever peace required my surrender. I did not respond to the bridal shower invitation for 4 days. Then I called my mother and told her I would come. Her relief sounded rehearsed. She reminded me to dress nicely, to bring a gift, and to avoid bringing up the past. I held the phone against my ear and looked at the framed photo on my desk, the one of Grandma Evelyn and me, on her porch, both of us squinting into late afternoon sun. "I'll behave," I said. What I did not say was that behaving no longer meant disappearing. The morning of the shower, I wore a navy wrap dress, small gold earrings, and the calmest face I owned. I bought Addison a crystal picture frame from her registry, wrapped it in ivory paper, and tied it with a white satin bow. In the passenger seat beside me, I placed an old leather folder from my office bag. Inside were copies of documents I had never planned to use at a party. At least not until I saw the pearls. My parents' house looked like a magazine pretending to be a home. White hydrangeas lined the steps. Pale balloons arched over the doorway. A catering van sat by the curb. Through the front windows I could see women in pastel dresses moving through rooms I had once cleaned before dinner parties while Addison sat upstairs painting her nails. When I stepped onto the porch, the wood creaked under my heels, and for a second, I could almost hear Grandma's voice telling me to lift my chin. Not because I was better than anyone, because I belonged somewhere, even if other people spent years trying to convince me I did not. My mother opened the door before I knocked. Patricia Whitaker was 60, elegant, and very good at making cruelty look like concern. Her silver blonde hair was pinned low at her neck, and she wore a blush-colored dress with pearl buttons down the front. When she saw me, her eyes swept over my outfit like an inspection. "Nora," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. "Thank you for coming. Addison's been nervous." "About the shower?" I asked. My mother's smile tightened. "About everyone getting along." There it was. The warning wrapped as hospitality. Inside the house smelled like gardenias, champagne, and money my father liked to pretend we did not have. Guests stood around the dining room admiring towers of pastries and tiny sandwiches. My Aunt Carol waved from near the fireplace. A few cousins gave me polite smiles, the kind people offer when they have been told there is a history but not the truth. Then I heard Addison laugh. She was standing near the French doors in a white lace dress, one hand pressed dramatically to her chest as two bridesmaids admired her. Her hair fell in soft blonde waves over one shoulder. Her engagement ring flashed every time she moved. And around her neck, resting against her collarbone like it had always belonged, there were Grandma Evelyn's pearls. For a moment the room went silent in my head. I did not move. I did not speak. I only looked at the necklace at the magnolia clasp, turned slightly to the side at the tiny scratch near the edge that Grandma got when I was 9, and dropped it on the bathroom tile while trying to help her dress for church. I remembered crying because I thought I had ruined it. Grandma kissed my forehead and said beautiful things could survive small damage. Addison saw me staring. Her smile sharpened. "Oh," she said, brightly touching the pearls. "You noticed." The bridesmaids turned. My mother appeared beside me as if she had been waiting for this exact second. My father stood near the bar with a glass of iced tea, his jaw already set. The room did not know there was a match on the floor yet, but my family did. They had placed it there themselves. "Grandma's necklace," I said. Addison tilted her head. "Mom and Dad gave it to me this morning. Isn't it perfect for the shower?" My mother placed a hand on my arm. Not gently. "Nora, today is not the day." I looked at her hand until she removed it. My father walked over, lowering his voice in a way that somehow made everyone listen harder. "Your grandmother had many pieces. Your sister is the bride. It was appropriate." Appropriate. That word did a lot of work in my family. It meant whatever protected their choice after they had already made it. I asked, "Did Grandma leave that necklace to Addison?" The air shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. A few women stopped pretending not to listen. Addison's fingers tightened around the pearls. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. My father gave a small laugh, the kind meant to embarrass me back into silence. "We are not doing legal language at a bridal shower," he said. That was when I knew. Not suspected. Knew. Because my father loved legal language when it helped him. He used it for tax deductions, business contracts, and explaining why I could not borrow the car in college because my name was not on the insurance. He respected paperwork, the way some men respect loaded weapons. If he suddenly wanted feelings instead of documents, it meant the documents were not on his side. Addison recovered first. She stepped closer, lowering her voice but keeping it loud enough for the nearest guests. "Nora, please don't make this weird. Grandma loved all of us." "She did," I said. "And I'm getting married," she added, as if that solved ownership. I looked at the pearls again. "That does not answer my question." My mother's cheeks flushed. "You always do this. You take something beautiful and turn it into an accusation." "No," I said. "I ask a clear question. You turn that into an accusation because you don't like the answer." Aunt Carol made a small noise by the fireplace. Someone set down a champagne flute too hard. The tiny sound cracked through the room. Addison's face changed then. The sweetness drained just enough for me to see the old girl underneath, the one who used to borrow my clothes without asking, and then cry when I wanted them back. "You're jealous," she said softly. "You've always been jealous of me." That sentence landed exactly where she aimed it. Not because it was true but because it was familiar. It had been the family's favorite shortcut for years. If I objected, I was jealous. If I was hurt, I was jealous. If Addison crossed a line, my pain became envy, and envy made me ugly enough to ignore. I felt my throat tighten. I hated that my body still remembered how to shrink. Then I thought of Grandma Evelyn sitting beside me at the kitchen table when I was 19, sliding a sealed envelope across the worn wood, while my parents argued in the next room about Addison's college deposit. "Keep this somewhere safe," she whispered. "Not because I expect trouble. Because I know people." At 19, I had laughed nervously and asked if she was being dramatic. Grandma looked at me over her glasses. "Nora, people who call you dramatic are often hoping you won't keep records." That envelope was in the leather folder sitting in my car. I did not bring it inside yet. Instead, I gave Addison the gift I had wrapped that morning. I placed it on the gift table among pink ribbons and monogrammed bags. My hands were steady now. That surprised me. Pain had rushed through me fast and hot, but underneath it was something colder, not rage, recognition. My parents had not misunderstood Grandma's wishes. They had counted on my silence. My mother followed me to the sideboard, her perfume cutting through the smell of flowers. "Nora," she whispered, "you are embarrassing yourself." I turned to face her. "No, Mom. I think you're afraid I'm done protecting you from what you did." Her eyes flickered. "There. 1 second. Less than one." But I saw it. Before she could answer, Addison clapped her hands and announced that everyone should gather in the living room for the gift opening. Chairs scraped. Women smiled too widely. My father lifted his glass and told everyone they were here to celebrate love, family, and tradition. He looked directly at me when he said, "Tradition." I sat on the edge of a cream-colored armchair near the back of the room. Addison took the center seat like a queen receiving tribute. The pearls glowed against her skin. My mother stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder. My father hovered nearby, proud and guarded. Gift after gift was opened. Crystal bowls, linen sheets, a handmade quilt from one of her future in-laws. Addison performed gratitude beautifully. She gasped, laughed, teared up on cue, and made everyone feel generous. I watched the room soften around her. She had always known how to become whatever people needed to see. Then a woman I did not recognize entered through the foyer carrying a slim black case. She was in her late 50s with short dark hair and a charcoal dress. My father straightened when he saw her. My mother's face went pale in a way powder could not hide. Addison looked annoyed, then confused. The woman smiled politely. "I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm Marianne Bell, the appraiser from Bell & Hart Fine Jewelry. Mrs. Whitaker requested an authentication for an heirloom necklace." My mother's lips parted. My father said nothing. Addison laughed lightly, touching the pearls again. "Oh yes. Mom said it would be smart for insurance before the wedding." Marianne nodded. "Of course. If now is still convenient, it will only take a few minutes." My parents had arranged an appraisal, in front of guests, for insurance, for Addison. The nerve of it was almost impressive. My mother found her voice. "Maybe we should do it in the study." "Nonsense," Addison said, basking again, now that she understood the attention was about her. "Everyone already knows Grandma's pearls are special." I looked at my mother. She would not look back. Marianne set the black case on the coffee table and put on white cotton gloves. Addison unclasped the necklace and handed it over with theatrical care. For the first time since I arrived, the pearls were not touching her. I inhaled slowly, and something in my chest loosened. The appraiser examined the strand under a small light. She checked the clasp, the knotting, the surface of the pearls. Her movements were practiced and calm. The room leaned in, enchanted by the idea of value being confirmed. Addison smiled as if waiting for applause. Then, Marianne stopped. Her gloved thumb pressed gently against the inside of the magnolia clasp. She frowned, adjusted the light, and turned the necklace over. "Interesting," she murmured. My father cleared his throat. "Is there a problem?" Marianne did not answer immediately. She took a small tool from her case and touched the back of the clasp. A tiny panel so thin I had never noticed it as a child shifted open. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges, and tucked so neatly, it looked like it had been waiting years for air. The room went completely still. Marianne looked up. "There appears to be a note hidden inside the clasp." Addison's smile vanished. My mother whispered, "That's impossible." And I knew before Marianne unfolded it, before anyone read a single word, that Grandma Evelyn had seen this day coming long before the rest of us did. Marianne unfolded the note with the kind of care people use when they understand that paper can become heavier than gold. The room held its breath. Even Addison stopped touching her bare throat and looked down at her lap as if the pearls had left a mark on her skin. My mother moved first, taking one step toward the coffee table, but Marianne lifted her hand slightly and said, "I should document this before it's handled by anyone else." My father's face darkened. "That won't be necessary." Marianne looked at him with professional calm. "For an insurance appraisal, Mr. Whitaker, any hidden compartment or accompanying documentation becomes part of the item's record, especially if it affects provenance." Provenance. The word sliced through the room because it sounded too clean to argue with. My father understood that. I saw it in his eyes. He could dismiss me as emotional, jealous, difficult. He could not dismiss a woman wearing gloves, holding a note and speaking in the language of value. Addison gave a nervous laugh. "It's probably just some sweet old message from Grandma. She hid little things everywhere. She was sentimental." "She was careful," I said, before I could stop myself. My mother shot me a look that would have silenced me 10 years earlier. It almost worked. My chest tightened, and for 1 second I was back in the hallway outside my childhood bedroom listening to my parents tell Addison she could take my dress because Nora won't mind if we explain it right. I had minded. Nobody explained. The dress came back stained with punch and I was told to be generous. Marianne took a photo of the folded note with her phone, then opened it fully. The paper was small, no larger than a recipe card, and the handwriting was unmistakable. Grandma Evelyn wrote with a slant to the right, elegant but firm as if even her letters stood up straight. Marianne hesitated, then looked toward my mother. "Would you like me to read it privately?" "No," Addison said quickly before either of my parents could answer. "It's my shower. It's my necklace. Read it." The words landed with such confidence that several guests looked uncomfortable. My Aunt Carol pressed her fingers against her mouth. One of Addison's bridesmaids shifted in her chair. My mother closed her eyes for half a second, and that was the first moment I realized she might already know what the note said. Marianne looked at the paper again and read, "If this necklace has been opened, then someone has finally asked the question. I hope my family answered honestly." No one moved. She continued, voice lower now. "These pearls belong to my mother, then to me. I leave them to my granddaughter, Nora Grace Whitaker, who never once made me feel like love had to be performed. Nora sat with me in small rooms, drove me to appointments, remembered my tea without asking, and listened when others were too busy being important. The room changed temperature. My name hung there, full and undeniable. Nora Grace Whitaker. Not one of the girls. Not the family. Not whoever needs it most. Me. I felt the words enter my body slowly, like warmth returning to numb fingers. I wanted to cry, but not because I was sad. Because someone had reached from the past and placed a hand on my shoulder in front of everyone who had spent years pushing it away. Marianne swallowed and continued. "If Patricia or James tries to claim I meant otherwise, remind them I said this plainly in my kitchen on the 14th of March 2021 with Carol present. I am hiding this note because I know how people behave when they want peace without honesty." Aunt Carol made a sound like the breath had been knocked out of her. My father turned toward her. "Carol." She lowered her hand from her mouth. "Don't you dare," she whispered. Addison stood so fast, the chair behind her scraped the hardwood. "This is ridiculous. Grandma would never embarrass me like this." "She didn't," I said quietly. "You did that when you wore what wasn't yours." My mother's face hardened. "Nora, stop." I looked at her, and something in me went very still. No. It was such a small word. One syllable. But it felt like I had spent 31 years walking toward it. The room was no longer on Addison's side by default. I could see it happening in real time. The women who had smiled at her 5 minutes earlier were looking at the pearls on the coffee table, then at my parents, then at me. Their expressions shifted from confusion to discomfort to judgment. Not loud judgment, worse, quiet judgment. The kind that settles and stays. My father stepped forward and reached for the note. Marianne drew it back. "I can't allow that until I've copied it for my file." "This is a family matter," he said. "It became part of a professional appraisal when you invited me here," Marianne replied. My father was not used to being corrected in his own living room. He glanced around as if searching for someone to restore the old order. My mother looked at the guests and tried to smile, but her mouth trembled. Addison's eyes filled with tears, and for one dangerous moment I saw the machine begin to work. Her tears had always been a family emergency. "Are you happy now?" Addison asked me. "You came here to humiliate me." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the lie was so perfectly shaped. She had worn my grandmother's necklace in front of me, accepted it as a bridal trophy, demanded the note be read aloud, and still found a way to make herself the injured party. "No," I said. "I came here with a wrapped gift and low expectations. You still managed to disappoint me." A few guests looked down quickly. Aunt Carol's eyes shone, but she did not look away. My mother moved beside Addison and put both hands on her shoulders. "This is cruel, Nora. Your sister didn't know. She knew enough to call it hers." "She trusted us," my mother said. That sentence did something to me. It opened a door I had nailed shut years ago. I remembered the week after Grandma Evelyn died. My mother asked me to come help sort clothes because Addison couldn't handle it. I spent 2 days folding cardigans, wrapping dishes, labeling boxes, and carrying donation bags down the stairs. Addison arrived on the 3rd day with a latte, and Red Eyes walked straight to Grandma's jewelry case and asked which pieces were valuable. My mother told me not to judge her grief. I remembered finding the jewelry case empty a month later. My father said everything had been stored in the safe until the estate was settled. When I asked about Grandma's written wishes, he said she had kept things informal because she trusted family. I wanted to believe that. I wanted so badly to believe that the people who raised me would not steal from me while using my grief as cover. So I let it sit. Not because I was weak. Because sometimes denial feels like the last way to keep a family. But Grandma had known better. Grandma had hidden a note in the very clasp of the necklace because she knew that one day someone would treat her love like inventory. She had trusted me with an envelope. She had named a witness. She had left a trail. Not a dramatic one. A practical one. Grandma believed in receipts, before receipts became a joke. Marianne finished photographing the note and placed it carefully on a white cloth beside the pearls. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said to my mother, "do you have any documentation showing the necklace was transferred to Addison?" My mother's eyes flicked to my father. "My father," said Evelyn, verbally expressed that the girls should share her things. Aunt Carol's voice came from the fireplace, thin but steady. "No, James," she said, "Nora should have the pearls." The room turned toward her. My father's jaw tightened. "You're misremembering." Carol stood slowly. She was Grandma's younger sister, 74, with arthritis in her hands and no patience left for handsome men who used confidence as proof. "I may forget where I put my glasses, but I remember my sister crying because she was afraid Nora would be cheated after she died." My mother whispered, "Carol, please." Carol looked at her with an expression I had never seen before. Not anger, exhaustion. "Patricia, I told you this would come back. You smiled at me in that kitchen and said, 'We'll handle it as a family.' I should have known that meant you would handle Nora." Addison began crying then. Real tears, maybe. Humiliated tears. Angry tears. Tears that arrived when the room no longer obeyed her. Her bridesmaid, Madison, put an arm around her, but even Madison looked unsure now. Sympathy had limits when a dead grandmother's handwriting was lying on the table. My father tried one last time to regain control. "Enough. Marianne, pack up the necklace. Nora, we will discuss this later. Guests, I apologize for this unfortunate distraction." Nobody moved. I stood. My knees were not as steady as my voice, but they held. "There won't be a later where this gets buried again." My mother stared at me. "What does that mean?" "It means I have Grandma's envelope." The color drained from my father's face so completely that I knew the envelope mattered before I even opened it. Addison wiped her cheeks. "What envelope?" My parents did not answer her. I looked at Marianne. "Would your appraisal record include related provenance documents if I provide them?" "Yes," she said. "Copies at least. Originals should stay protected." My father stepped toward me. "Nora, you are escalating something that could have been handled with grace." "There it is," I said. "Grace. You always want grace after you've taken something." My mother's eyes hardened. "You don't understand what it was like. Your grandmother favored you. She made Addison feel second best." That was the first honest thing my mother had said all day, and it was still crooked. I turned toward Addison. Grandma favored me because I showed up. That isn't the same as stealing love from you. Addison flinched, but I did not soften it. Because that was the part my family never wanted to discuss. Love had not been divided unfairly. Effort had. When Grandma needed groceries, I went. When she forgot her medication, I made the call list. When she wanted company but did not want to be a burden, I sat on her porch and listened to stories I had already heard. Addison sent heart emojis and forgot birthdays unless reminded. But Addison wanted the proof of intimacy without the intimacy itself. My father lowered his voice. Think carefully before you embarrass this family further. That old fear moved through me again. It knew the hallway, the kitchen, the car, rides home after family dinners where my mother would say I had been cold, ungrateful, sharp. It knew how quickly I could become the problem. But there were too many witnesses now. Too much paper. Too much of Grandma in the room. I am thinking carefully, I said. That's new for you because you're used to me thinking emotionally and then apologizing for it. I walked to the foyer, opened the front door, and went out to my car. The afternoon sunlight hit my face. For a second, I leaned both hands on the steering wheel and let myself shake. Inside that house were my parents, my sister, my grandmother's pearls, and 31 years of training telling me to go back in and make everyone comfortable. Instead, I opened the passenger door and picked up the leather folder. When I returned, the living room was quieter than before. No one had resumed eating, no one was laughing. The bridal shower had become something else, something stripped of ribbon and sugar. Addison sat rigid in her chair. My mother stood behind her like a guard. My father watched the folder in my hands as if it were a weapon. In a way, it was. I opened it on the coffee table beside the pearls. Inside were 3 copies. One was Grandma Evelyn's handwritten note from the envelope she had given me in 2021. One was a signed inventory page from her estate planning binder witnessed by Aunt Carol and a neighbor named Mrs. Jean Little. The third was an email Grandma had sent to me 6 months before she died with the subject line, "For when they tell you I never said it." A murmur moved through the room. My mother whispered, "You kept all of that." I looked at her. Grandma asked me to. No, my father said sharply. She was confused near the end. That lie came too fast. Aunt Carol snapped. She beat me at Scrabble the week before that email. The room would have laughed in any other circumstance. Instead, the silence became heavier. Marianne leaned over the inventory page. The necklace is listed here as double-strand pearls with magnolia clasp, belonging to Nora Grace Whitaker upon my death. There's a notation about a hidden note in the clasp. Addison stared at the page as if it had personally betrayed her. Mom. My mother did not look at her. That was when the room turned fully. Not with shouting, not with drama, with withdrawal. People stepped back from my parents. Aunt Carol moved beside me. Madison removed her arm from Addison's shoulders. My father's business partner's wife, who had been admiring the pastries earlier, picked up her purse and said softly, "Patricia, this is not right." It should have felt like victory. It didn't. It felt like standing over a grave and discovering the theft had started before the flowers wilted. Addison took off her engagement ring, twisted it, then shoved it back on as if she needed something shiny to hold. "So what do you want?" she snapped. "An apology, fine. I'm sorry Grandma liked you more. Are you happy?" My mother said Addison. But she said it too late. I closed the folder slowly. I want the necklace returned to me today. I want a written acknowledgement that it was given to you without legal or moral right. And I want every item of Grandma's that was removed from her house accounted for. My father laughed once. "You think you can demand an inventory at a bridal shower? I think you should be grateful I'm asking in a living room instead of filing a formal claim on Monday." That shut him up. For years, my family had treated my calm as emptiness. They mistook my quiet for a lack of options. They forgot that I worked every day in rooms where dead people's wishes had to be defended from living people's convenience. I knew what forms to request. I knew what language mattered. I knew how little sentiment was worth when someone had signed their name. Marianne placed the pearls back in their velvet pouch and slid them toward me instead of Addison. My mother made a small, wounded sound. Addison stared as if the pouch contained her future happiness. My father looked at Marianne with open hostility, but she remained perfectly composed. "Until ownership is clarified," she said, It should remain with the named recipient listed in the documentation presented. I picked up the pouch. The pearls were heavier than I remembered. I did not put them on. I could not. Not in that room, not with Addison's perfume still clinging to them, not with my mother watching me as if I had stolen back something that had never stopped being mine. I placed the pouch inside my leather folder and held it against my chest. Then I turned to leave. My mother followed me to the door. "Nora, don't do this." I looked at her. "You already did." Behind her, Addison was crying loudly now, and people were leaving in awkward pairs, whispering as they passed the gift table. The crystal picture frame I had brought sat unopened among the wreckage of pink ribbon. For some reason that broke my heart more than the shouting. I had tried to bring a gift to a woman who had worn my grief as decoration. My father called from the living room. "If you walk out with that necklace, don't expect this family to welcome you back." I stopped, with my hand on the front door. For most of my life that threat would have worked. Not because their welcome was warm, but because a cold place can still feel like shelter if it is the only house you know. I had spent years accepting crumbs from a table where I was expected to serve everyone else first. I looked back at him. "Then I guess we finally agree on something." I walked out with Grandma Evelyn's pearls in my folder, her handwriting copied in Marianne's file, and half of Charleston's most polite women now carrying the truth in their mouths. But that afternoon was not the end. It was the beginning of what my parents did next. By Sunday morning, my mother had already rewritten the story. She did it the way she did everything cruel, with perfect punctuation and just enough sorrow to sound dignified. The family group text came at 8:13 a.m. while I was sitting at my kitchen table with Grandma's pearls still sealed in the velvet pouch beside my coffee. Patricia Whitaker wrote that yesterday had been painful, that grief made people act out, and that she hoped everyone would give Nora space while she processed complicated feelings. She did not say she had given my sister jewelry that was never hers. She did not say Grandma's handwritten note had named me. She did not mention the appraiser, the hidden compartment, the inventory page, or Aunt Carol standing in her living room calling her out. My mother knew the power of omission. She could build an entire lie by leaving out the right 5 sentences. My phone kept buzzing. Cousins asking if I was okay. A bridesmaid telling me Addison was devastated. My father texting only once in his usual clipped style, "Return the necklace by 5 p.m. today, and we can still keep this private." I read that one twice, not because it scared me, but because of the words "still." They had stolen from me, been exposed in their own living room, and somehow believed privacy was a favor they were offering me. I did not reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and created a folder named Evelyn Whitaker, Personal Property. I scanned Grandma's letter at high resolution. I scanned the estate inventory page. I saved screenshots of my mother's group message, my father's threat, and Addison's Instagram story, where she had posted a black and white photo of herself crying beside a vase of roses. The caption read, "Some people can't let a bride have one happy day." By noon, the comments had started. Not from strangers, but worse, from women who knew our family just well enough to feel entitled. "Stay strong, Addie. Weddings bring out jealousy. Your grandma would want love, not drama." That last one made me put my phone face down and walk away from the table. Grandma Evelyn had wanted honesty. People who did not know her kept using her as a decoration. I spent that afternoon doing what my family had always mocked me for doing. I made records. I built a timeline. I wrote down the date Grandma gave me the envelope, the date she died, the date my mother asked me to help sort her clothes, the day I noticed the jewelry case was empty, and the moment Marianne Bell opened the clasp. Every fact went into a document. Every fact had a source. It was not revenge yet. It was structure. When people spend years making you feel unstable, the first thing you owe yourself is a record of reality. On Monday, I took a personal day from work and drove to Bell and Hart Fine Jewelry. The shop sat on King Street between an antique store and a linen boutique, all polished glass and quiet lighting. Marianne Bell came out from the back herself when she saw me. She did not hug me or pity me. She simply said, "I'm glad you came in." I nearly cried from that alone. In her office, Marianne placed a printed appraisal packet on the desk. The necklace had been photographed from every angle. The hidden note had been photographed separately, then transcribed. She had written that the note was discovered during examination inside a concealed compartment in the clasp, and that ownership documentation presented at the time named me as intended recipient. I cannot decide legal ownership, she said, carefully sliding the packet toward me. But I can document what I found and what I observed. That may be enough, I said. She looked at me for a moment. Your father called this morning. Of course he had. My father believed there was no door that confidence could not open. What did he want? He asked me to revise the report and remove reference to the note until the family could determine context. I laughed once quietly. Context. I declined, Marianne said. Then he suggested my firm could lose certain clients if we involved ourselves in a private dispute. There it was, the real James Whittaker. Polished in public, heavy-handed in private. He owned a small commercial real estate company and had spent decades mistaking influence for character. People smiled when he entered rooms. People returned his calls. People assumed a man that neat could not be that dishonest. I asked, would you be willing to state that in writing? Marianne's eyes sharpened. I already did. She handed me a second page. It was a brief memo for her file dated that morning, documenting my father's request and her refusal. Clean, professional, devastating. I held it between both hands and felt something shift. Not happiness. Leverage. The kind that did not need to shout. When I left the shop, my phone showed 7 missed calls from my mother and 1 voicemail from Addison. I played Addison's in my parked car, with the doors locked and the street noise low around me. Her voice was thick from crying, but underneath it was steel. Nora, this has gone way too far. My future mother-in-law is asking questions. Carter is upset. Do you understand what you're doing to my wedding? I need the pearls for the ceremony. Mom said Grandma would have wanted me to wear something from the family. You can have them after. Just stop making this about you. I stared out at a couple walking past with shopping bags, laughing like the world was simple. Then Addison added lower, and if you don't fix this, don't expect me to forget that you ruined me. Fix my life because Grandma liked you better. I saved the voicemail. That evening, Carter's mother called me. Her name was Helen Ashford, and I had met her only once at Addison's engagement brunch. She was gracious, reserved, and came from the kind of old Charleston family that cared deeply about reputation, but even more deeply about not being lied to in public. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I remembered Addison's caption and my mother's text and answered. Nora, Helen said, I hope I'm not intruding. You're not. She paused. I attended the shower. I saw enough to know I did not see everything. My son is being told this was a misunderstanding fueled by grief. Before our families move forward with the wedding, I need to know whether that is true. No one in my family had ever asked me that cleanly. Whether something was true. I closed my eyes for a moment. No, Mrs. Ashford. It was not a misunderstanding. Do you have documentation? Yes. Another pause. Would you be willing to show it to me? I looked at the folder on my table. A lifetime of training whispered that family matters stayed inside the family even when the family had already dragged your name through every polite circle in town. But there was no honor in protecting a lie that was actively attacking you. Yes, I said. But I want Carter present too. If Addison is going to marry him, he deserves to know what is being hidden. Helen exhaled softly. That is fair. We agreed to meet Wednesday evening at her home. Before we hung up, she said, Nora, I'm sorry for what happened Saturday. The apology was so simple that it almost hurt more than the cruelty. No explanation, no demand, no price attached, just sorry. On Tuesday, my parents escalated. My father emailed me a letter on Whittaker Properties letterhead, as if the company logo could turn intimidation into authority. He claimed I had removed jewelry from a private residence during an emotionally charged event and demanded its return within 48 hours. He used phrases like potential civil remedies and reputational harm. He copied my mother Addison and foolishly Aunt Carol. Carol called me 5 minutes later. He always was a pompous ass, she said. I laughed so suddenly, I had to sit down. Then her voice softened. Your grandmother would be proud of you. That almost undid me. I pressed my fingers to my eyes and tried to breathe through it. I don't feel strong. Strong rarely feels like strong while you're doing it, Carol said. It mostly feels like shaking and doing the right thing anyway. She told me something then that I had not known. Grandma Evelyn had asked her to check the jewelry case after the funeral, but by the time Carol came to the house, my parents had already taken it. When Carol asked, my mother said they were protecting the pieces from confusion. Grandma had also left a small handwritten personal property memorandum in her desk drawer separate from the estate binder. Carol had seen it once months before Grandma died. "Do you know where it is now?" I asked. "No," Carol said. "But I know what was on it. The pearls to you, the sapphire brooch to you, her mother's cameo ring to you, the silver sugar spoon to Jean Little, the teacups divided between you and me. Addison was listed for the pink quilt because she always liked it as a child." I sat very still. The sapphire brooch. The one Addison wore to Grandma's funeral. My mother had not made one mistake. She had emptied a list. That night I opened every photo I had from the months after Grandma died. Addison in the brooch at the funeral. Addison's apartment with Grandma's mirror in the background. Addison's engagement shoot with the recipe box. My mother's Easter table with the silver spoon beside a crystal sugar bowl. My father's hand resting on the antique sideboard that had been in Grandma's dining room. Objects leave trails. People forget that when they are busy feeling entitled. By Wednesday afternoon I had a packet thick enough to feel embarrassing until I reminded myself I was not the one who made the facts ugly. I included Grandma's letter, the hidden note transcript, Marianne's appraisal report, the memo about my father's call, the inventory page, Addison's voicemail, screenshots of the social media posts, and a photo appendix of missing items. I placed everything in clear sleeves, labeled and dated. At 6 o'clock I drove to Helen Ashford's house south of Broad. It was quieter than my parents' home, less performative. Carter opened the door himself. He was tall, kind-faced, and looked like a man who had not slept well in 2 days. Addison had always described him as loyal. I wondered if she understood loyalty did not mean blindness. Helen led us to a sitting room. No champagne, no flowers, no audience. Just 3 people, a coffee table, and a folder. Carter spoke first. "Addison says you've always resented her." "I know," I said. "She says your grandmother promised the necklace to both of you." I placed the appraisal packet on the table. "Then she can show you where Grandma wrote that." He flinched slightly, not because I was harsh but because truth has a sound when it enters a room. I walked them through the documents slowly, not dramatically. I did not embellish. I did not call Addison names. I did not need to. The paper did what emotion could not. When Carter listened to the voicemail, his face changed. He did not look angry at first. He looked embarrassed, then sad, then very still. Helen read Marianne's memo twice. "Your father tried to pressure the appraiser after the shower." "Yes. And he threatened you afterward." I handed her the letter on company letterhead. Carter rubbed both hands over his face. "Why would they do this over a necklace?" I looked at him. "It was never just a necklace." He nodded slowly, like he did not fully understand yet but was beginning to. Before we could say more, Helen's housekeeper appeared at the doorway. "Mrs. Ashford, Mr. and Mrs. Whitaker are here, with Miss Addison." Helen looked at me. I had not expected them, but I should have. My parents did not avoid rooms they believed they could dominate. They entered them early and rearranged the air. "Would you like me to ask them to leave?" Helen said. I touched the folder on my lap. My hands were cold but my voice was not. "No, let them in." My mother entered first, pale and elegant in cream. My father followed in a navy blazer, carrying himself like a man arriving to correct a misunderstanding. Addison came last, eyes red, diamond ring, bright chin lifted. She froze when she saw the documents spread across Helen's coffee table. "Nora," my mother said softly, with wounded disappointment polished into every syllable. "I cannot believe you brought strangers into this." Helen's expression cooled. "You are in my home, Patricia." My mother blinked, unused to being placed. My father looked at Carter. "Son, this is exactly what I warned you about. Nora has spent years collecting grievances. She works around estate files and thinks every family disagreement is a case." Carter looked at him. "Did Grandma Evelyn leave the pearls to Nora?" The question was so direct that my father had nowhere graceful to stand. He adjusted his cuff. Evelyn was emotional near the end. Aunt Carol's voice came from behind them. "You keep saying that like everyone who knew her is dead." We all turned. Carol stood in the hallway with Mrs. Jean Little beside her, small, white-haired and holding a canvas tote against her hip. I had not seen Mrs. Little since Grandma's funeral. She had been Grandma's neighbor for 20 years and had fed her cat during hospital stays. Helen must have called her. Or Carol had. My mother whispered, "Jean." Mrs. Little stepped into the room. I brought something. From the tote, she pulled out a manila envelope with Grandma Evelyn's handwriting across the front, for Nora if Patricia and James pretend they forgot. Addison made a small, strangled sound. My father's face went hard. Where did you get that? Mrs. Little looked at him as if he were furniture blocking a doorway. Evelyn gave it to me the week before she died. She said Carol had one piece of the truth and Nora had another, but she wanted a spare copy outside the family because she knew how you two operated. For the first time I saw real fear in my mother's eyes. Not sadness, not embarrassment. Fear. Helen stood. I think everyone should sit down. Nobody did. Mrs. Little handed the envelope to me. My name sat there in Grandma's firm handwriting, not hidden in a clasp this time, not tucked away in a folder but visible to everyone. My fingers shook when I opened it. Inside was a copy of the personal property memorandum Carol had described, signed by Grandma, witnessed by Carol and Jean, with every item listed clearly. The pearls. The sapphire brooch. The cameo ring. The recipe box. The mirror. The silver spoon. The teacups. Next to the pearls, Grandma had written one sentence in parentheses. Nora does not have to share what I gave her, just because others are uncomfortable with being remembered differently. I read it twice. Then I looked at Addison, at my parents, at the room full of people waiting for the next lie. My father reached for the envelope. That document has no legal standing until it is reviewed. I pulled it back. Then let's review it properly. Carter's voice was quiet. At the rehearsal dinner tomorrow. Addison turned on him. What? He looked at her with a pain I almost felt sorry for. My family is about to join yours. If this is a misunderstanding, clear it. If it isn't, I'm not walking into a marriage built on a lie. My mother said, Carter, you don't understand what you're asking. Helen looked at her. He understands exactly. The room held still around us and I felt the edge of something larger than the necklace finally come into view. Tomorrow night, both families would be in one place. My parents would have their reputation. Addison would have her wedding smile. And I would have Grandma's handwriting, Marianne's report, Aunt Carol, Mrs. Little, and the truth they had spent 2 years trying to bury. For once, I was not the one cornered. They were. The rehearsal dinner was held at the Harbor Club, where the windows faced the water, and every table looked arranged for a photograph. White candles burned in glass cylinders. Gold-rimmed plates sat beneath folded linen napkins. Addison had chosen pale pink roses again, as if repeating the shower's colors could erase what happened there. When I walked in wearing a simple black dress and Grandma's pearls in my purse, conversations lowered but did not stop. My parents were already near the front of the room, smiling with the stiff determination of people who had decided confidence would serve as evidence. Addison stood beside Carter in an ivory dress, her hand looped through his arm. She looked beautiful. She always did. But beauty had never been the issue. The issue was what my family believed beauty entitled her to take. Carter saw me first. His face was pale but he gave me a small nod. Helen Ashford stood beside him, composed and watchful. Aunt Carol and Mrs. Little arrived together 5 minutes after me, both carrying purses large enough to hold documents and moral disappointment. Marianne Bell was there too, not as a guest but at Helen's request, seated quietly near the side wall with a sealed copy of her report. My mother crossed the room before I reached my table. Nora, she said, softly smiling for anyone watching. There is still time to avoid making a scene. I looked at the tables, the candles, the water darkening beyond the windows. You keep calling the truth a scene. Her smile did not move. And you keep calling cruelty, honesty? No, I said. Cruelty was giving Addison the necklace and inviting an appraiser to bless the theft in front of everyone. Her eyes flashed. For 1 second the polished mask cracked. You have no idea what it was like watching your grandmother choose you over my daughter. I felt that sentence settle into me heavy but finally named. Grandma did not choose me over Addison. She chose based on who showed up for her. You're angry because love left a record you couldn't edit. Before she could answer, Carter tapped a spoon lightly against his glass. The room quieted. He looked at Addison first, and there was grief in his expression, the kind that comes before a decision rather than after it. Addison gripped his arm tighter, her smile frozen in place. My father moved closer to the front, ready to interrupt if the air turned against him. Carter said, "Before we toast tonight, there is a family matter that needs to be addressed honestly. I was told there had been a misunderstanding about an heirloom necklace. Since that misunderstanding affects trust between our families, I asked that the documents be brought here. A ripple moved through the room. Addison whispered, "Carter, don't." He looked at her. "I gave everyone a chance to clear it privately." My father stepped forward. "This is inappropriate." Helen's voice was calm and cold. "James, sit down." That was the first time I had ever seen my father obey someone outside a courtroom or a bank office. He did not sit, but he stopped moving. Helen turned to me and nodded once. My legs felt hollow when I stood, yet my hands were steady as I placed the folder on the small table near the front. I did not look at the guests. I looked at the paper. I started with the simplest fact. My grandmother, Evelyn Whitaker, owned a double-strand pearl necklace with a magnolia clasp. On Saturday, my parents gave that necklace to my sister Addison for her bridal shower. When Marianne Bell examined it for insurance appraisal, she found a hidden note inside the clasp, written by my grandmother. Marianne stood and read the relevant lines from her report, not the whole note, just enough. My name, the date, the sentence about peace without honesty. Her voice was professional, almost gentle. The room listened differently than the shower guests had listened. This crowd understood reputation, and reputation was most fragile when documentation entered the room. Addison began crying before anyone accused her directly. "I didn't know about the note," she said. "I didn't know Grandma wrote that." I turned to her. "I believe that." Her face flickered with hope. Then I said, "But you knew I asked a direct question at the shower and you still called the necklace yours. You knew I was hurt, and you turned that hurt into jealousy. You knew enough to make yourself the victim before the truth was even finished being read." The hope disappeared. My mother stepped beside Addison. She was embarrassed. Anyone would be emotional. Aunt Carol stood then. Her hands shook but her voice did not. "Patricia, you knew Evelyn wanted Nora to have the pearls. I was in the kitchen when she told you. Jean was there when she signed the property memorandum. You and James removed those things from her house before the rest of us could review them." Mrs. Little opened her envelope and laid the memorandum beside the report. The paper looked small under the chandelier light. Small but stronger than every excuse in the room. I read the item list aloud, keeping my voice even. The pearls to me, the sapphire brooch to me, the cameo ring to me, the recipe box, the mirror, the teacups. Each item became a bell. When I said sapphire brooch, Addison touched her collarbone as if it were still pinned there. Carter noticed. So did everyone else. My father finally spoke. "A personal property memorandum is not always dispositive." I looked at him. Maybe not. But hiding it, emptying her jewelry case, giving the items away and then pressuring an appraiser to remove the note from her report says you knew exactly what it meant. Marianne handed Helen the memo, documenting my father's phone call. Helen read it silently, then passed it to Carter. His face tightened. He looked at my father. "You tried to get the appraiser to change the report." My father's mouth opened, but no clean answer came out. That silence did what shouting never could. Addison pulled away from Carter. "So what? It's jewelry. It's old stuff. Why is everyone acting like I robbed a bank?" I stared at her, and for the first time all week I felt no anger. Just clarity. Because you didn't want Grandma's things. You wanted the story they gave you. You wanted to stand in front of people wearing proof that you were loved without doing the work of loving her back. Her face crumpled, but I had learned not to hand my boundaries to someone just because they cried. My mother turned toward the Ashfords, desperate now. "This family has been grieving. Nora has always had trouble letting things go. We made a poor judgment maybe, but not a malicious one." I reached into my folder and took out the printed screenshots. My mother's group text, Addison's Instagram story, my father's letter demanding return of the necklace and threatening civil remedies. I placed them down one by one. "This was after you were caught. Not before. This is what you did when you knew the truth." Helen read the pages. Carter read them after her. Around us, the room had become painfully still. Addison's future in-laws were not whispering anymore. My parents' friends were not smiling politely. The lie had lost its audience, and without an audience it looked small and mean. Carter removed Addison's hand from his sleeve. He did it gently, which somehow made it worse. "I need the wedding postponed." Addison stared at him. "You can't be serious." "I am. My invitations went out." "I know. My dress is fitted." "I know." "You're doing this because of her," she shouted, pointing at me. Carter looked at her for a long second. No. I'm doing this because when the truth showed up, you attacked the person it protected. That sentence changed the room. Not loudly, permanently. My father began talking about emotions running high, about families surviving worse, about private conversations and public misunderstandings, but the words had lost their authority. Helen told him the Ashford family would be stepping back until all property disputes were resolved and a full accounting of Evelyn Whittaker's belongings was provided. She said it politely. It sounded like a door locking. My mother looked at me, then truly looked as if I had become someone she did not recognize. Are you satisfied? I thought about Grandma's porch, the enamel bowl, the way she clapped at my graduation when no one else came. I thought about every year I mistook endurance for belonging. I thought about the pearls sitting in my purse, not as a prize but as proof that love can survive manipulation if someone protects the record. No, I said. But I am finished. That was the boundary my family had never prepared for, not anger, not punishment, finished. Within a week, Carter and Addison officially postponed the wedding. My mother told people it was due to stress. Helen told people nothing, which in Charleston was somehow louder. My father's letter disappeared from his company email system after his attorney probably told him how foolish it looked. But by then I had copies, and more importantly, so did people who no longer accepted his version automatically. A formal inventory happened 2 weeks later in my parents' house, not because they became honest but because their attorney recommended cooperation. The sapphire brooch was found in Addison's jewelry drawer. The cameo ring was in my mother's safe. The recipe box sat on Addison's bookshelf, still tied with ribbon from her engagement shoot. The mirror was harder to retrieve, but eventually even that came back. I did not take everything Grandma listed for me because I wanted to fill my apartment with evidence. I took what mattered: the pearls, the brooch, the recipe box, the blue enamel bowl no one had thought valuable enough to steal. I gave the silver spoon to Mrs. Little, exactly as Grandma wanted. Aunt Carol took the teacups and we drank bitter coffee from them one Sunday afternoon, laughing until both of us cried. My parents did apologize technically. My father sent an email saying mistakes were made during a difficult season. My mother left a voicemail saying she hoped I would not let objects destroy a family. Addison texted once, asking if I understood how badly I had embarrassed her. None of them said we stole from you. None of them said we lied. None of them said you deserved better. So I did not answer. People think no contact always arrives like a slammed door. For me, it arrived like turning down a volume that had been hurting my ears since childhood. No grand announcement, no final speech. I stopped responding to guilt, disguised as love. I stopped attending dinners where I was invited only to be corrected. I stopped translating disrespect into family tradition. The first Easter after everything happened, I put on Grandma's pearls and went to church with Aunt Carol. I sat in the front row because that was where Grandma had sat for me. The clasp rested warm against the back of my neck. Nobody saw the hidden compartment. Nobody needed to. I knew what it had carried. A note, a warning, a final act of protection from a woman who understood that truth sometimes needs a hiding place until the right hands find it. After the service, I drove alone to Grandma's old house. My parents had sold it the year after she died, but the new owners had kept the porch swing. I parked across the street and stayed in the car, not because I was afraid to approach, but because some places belong to who we were, not who we are becoming. The house looked smaller than my memory. Most things do. I touched the pearls and thought about that day at my graduation, when Grandma told me they would remind me I was seen. For years I thought being seen meant being chosen by people who kept looking away. I know better now. Sometimes being seen means one person loved you clearly enough to leave proof. Sometimes it means you finally stop asking blind people to witness your pain. Family is not a word that turns theft into sharing. Love is not a reason to erase someone's wishes. Peace is not the silence of the person who is wronged. And forgiveness, if it ever comes, is not a performance owed to the people who only want it after their lie stops working. I still keep Grandma's hidden note in an archival sleeve inside my desk. The pearls stay in their velvet pouch unless I choose to wear them. Not for weddings, not for approval, not to prove anything to Addison, my parents, or the room that turned against them. I wear them when I need to remember the difference between being difficult and being done. My parents gave my sister my late grandmother's jewelry for her bridal shower. But they forgot Grandma Evelyn knew exactly who they were.